The forest floor blurred beneath. Elena's feet as she crashed through the undergrowth, her lungs burning with each ragged breath. Branches clawed at her face and arms, drawing thin lines of blood that she couldn't feel through the adrenaline, coursing through her veins. Behind her, the sound of heavy boots and guttural shouts echoed through the trees, getting closer with every passing second. She'd been running for what felt like hours, but the border fence, the one thing standing between her and safety, remained maddeningly out of reach. She didn't dare look back. She couldn't afford to lose even a fraction of a second. Her 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, was waiting for her on the other side, believing her mother would keep her promise. That belief was the only thing keeping Elena's legs moving when every muscle screamed for her to stop. The men chasing her had made their intentions clear back at the checkpoint. There would be no mercy, no second chances, just a shallow grave in these woods that stretched endlessly between two countries, two worlds, two destinies. Elena had left everything behind. Her home, her family's photographs, the wedding ring she'd worn for 10 years before her husband died. All she carried now was a small waterproof pouch tucked inside her jacket, containing Sophia's birth certificate and the last picture they'd taken together. That, and the desperate hope that somewhere ahead, beyond the darkness of these trees, there was still kindness left in the world. Her foot caught on a root, sending her sprawling forward. Pain exploded through her knee as she hit the ground hard, tasting dirt and copper. The shouts behind her grew louder, triumphant. They knew she was flagging. They knew it was almost over. Elena forced herself up, ignoring the warm blood soaking through her torn jeans. 3 more steps, 10 more, 100 more. She didn't let herself think beyond that. The math of survival had become that simple. Then through the tangle of branches ahead, she saw it, the glint of metal in the moonlight. The border fence, topped with razor wire, stretched in both directions as far as she could see. On the other side, barely visible through the chain link, stood 2 figures in uniform. Border Patrol agents, the Iron Guardians, as people called them, known for their unwavering enforcement of the law, their reputation for turning back desperate souls without a second thought. Elena's heart sank even as her legs propelled her forward. She'd heard the stories. These weren't the kind of officers who looked the other way or showed compassion. They were career agents who'd built their lives on the principle that rules existed for a reason, that borders meant something, that illegal crossings couldn't be tolerated regardless of the sob story behind them. But she had nowhere else to go. Help! The word tore from her throat as she burst from the tree line, stumbling toward the fence. Please! The 2 officers, one older with silver threading through his dark hair, the other younger with a stocky build, immediately tensed, their hands moving to their weapons. They'd been doing a routine patrol, their flashlights sweeping the perimeter, when this wild-eyed woman came crashing out of the forest. Stop right there! The older officer, whose name tag read Morrison, commanded. His voice carried the authority of 25 years on the job. Elena collapsed against the fence, her fingers threading through the chain link, her entire body shaking. Please, she gasped. Please help me. My daughter, she's waiting, I promised. The younger officer, Martinez, moved closer, his flashlight beam catching the blood on Elena's face and clothes. Ma'am, you need to step back from the fence. You're on restricted. His words were cut, short by the sound of men crashing through. The forest behind Elena. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, their faces twisted with rage. They wore mismatched tactical gear, weapons hanging from their belts. Smugglers, the kind who'd promised Elena safe passage across the border for everything she had left, then decided halfway through that she might be worth more to certain buyers, who paid premium prices for desperate women. When she'd overheard their real plans and run, they'd taken it personally. The lead smuggler, a scarred man with dead eyes, stopped when he saw the Border Patrol agents. He held up his hands in mock surrender, a cold smile spreading across his face. Officers, this woman owes us money. We're just here to collect what's ours. Morrison's jaw tightened. He'd seen this kind of scum before, operating in the lawless stretch between nations where jurisdiction got murky and people fell through the cracks. But this was American soil. These men had no business here. This is U.S. territory, Morrison said flatly. Whatever your business is, it ends at that tree line. Turn around and go back the way you came." The smuggler's smile widened. "Sure, sure. But the woman, she comes with us first. She crossed illegally, didn't she? So technically she's on your side, but she's not supposed to be there either. Maybe you should just hand her over, save yourself the paperwork." Elena's hands tightened on the fence. She could feel the weight of the moment. The terrible mathematics of bureaucracy versus brutality. These officers had every reason to enforce the law, to see her as just another illegal border crosser. Why would they risk anything for her? Martinez looked at Morrison, waiting for the senior officer's call. This was his call to make. Morrison had spent a quarter-century on this border. He'd followed the rules, made the tough calls, sent back thousands of people who'd tried to cross illegally. He believed in the law, in the integrity of borders, in the system he'd sworn to uphold. His record was spotless. His pension was 3 years away. Then the door opened, and Elena stood there, bandaged and exhausted but alive. Alive and reaching for her daughter with shaking hands. Sophia's crayon hit the floor. She launched herself across the room with a cry that contained every lonely night, every scared moment, every whispered prayer. Elena caught her, sinking to her knees, wrapping her daughter in arms that had carried her this far and would carry her further still. Morrison stood in the doorway for just a moment, watching. His radio crackled with other calls, other duties, other rules that needed enforcing. But for this one moment, he let himself acknowledge that sometimes the most important law wasn't written in any book. It was written in the space between fear and hope, between isolation and connection, between the world as it was and the world as it should be. It was the law that said every child deserved their mother, and every mother deserved a chance to keep the promises made to their child. As Morrison turned to leave, Elena looked up and met his eyes. No words passed between them. None were needed. In that glance was a debt that could never be repaid and didn't need to be. An acknowledgement that humanity sometimes required us to see beyond the immediate letter of the law to its deeper spirit. That night, as Sophia finally fell asleep in her mother's arms, Elena stared at the ceiling and remembered the moment when everything could have ended differently, when 2 officers could have chosen the easier path, could have cited regulations and procedures, and washed their hands of one more desperate woman in a world full of desperate people. Instead, they'd chosen to see her. Really see her. Not as a problem to be processed or a violation to be punished, but as a human being in desperate need of the one thing that made civilization worthwhile: compassion. The road ahead would still be hard. There would be hearings and applications, uncertainties and challenges. But tonight she was safe. Her daughter was in her arms. And somewhere out there, 2 officers were going about their duties, unaware that they'd become someone's heroes simply by remembering that before laws and borders and regulations, there had to be people willing to recognize their shared humanity. The Iron Guardians had lived up to their name, but they'd guarded something more precious than boundaries. They'd guarded the belief that kindness wasn't weakness, that compassion wasn't compromise, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was simply choose to care when no one would have, blame them for looking away. But he also had a daughter. She'd be about this woman's age now. And somewhere in that exhausted, terrified face pressed against the fence, he saw something that transcended policy manuals and enforcement protocols. He saw someone's child. Morrison's hand moved to his radio. "This is Unit 7. We have a situation at Checkpoint Delta 9. 3 armed individuals pursuing an injured woman who's requested asylum, requesting immediate backup and medical assistance." The smuggler's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake." "No," Morrison said, his voice like steel. "You made the mistake when you crossed that tree line. Martinez, call it in. Full detail. And get this woman medical attention." Martinez was already moving, speaking rapidly into his own radio while pulling a first aid kit from his belt. He knelt beside Elena, who'd collapsed against the fence, overwhelmed. "Ma'am, we're going to help you. Can you tell me where you're hurt?" Elena couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face, washing clean tracks through the dirt and blood. She'd expected to be turned away, to be sent back into those woods, into those waiting hands. Instead, this man was opening a gate in the fence, helping her through, treating her wounds with gentle efficiency. The smugglers began backing into the trees, unwilling to risk an actual confrontation with U.S. law enforcement. The lead man pointed at Elena. "This isn't over." Yeah, it is, Morrison called after them. And if I see you anywhere near this fence again, I'll make sure you regret it. As the criminals melted back into the forest, Morrison turned to Elena. His expression was still serious, but something had softened around his eyes. Ma'am, you're going to have to answer a lot of questions. There's a process for asylum seekers, and I can't promise you what the outcome will be, but right now you're safe. No one's going to hurt you here. Elena nodded, unable to find words adequate for what she was feeling. Sophia. She could see. Sophia again. She could keep her promise. My daughter, she finally managed. She's at the refugee center in Brownsville. I told her I'd come. I told her I'd find her. Morrison exchanged a glance with Martinez. By the book, they should process Elena first. Keep her in holding until all the paperwork was completed. It could take days. But sometimes, the book didn't account for everything that mattered. Martinez, Morrison said quietly. When backup gets here, you ride with them and make sure she gets processed properly. I'll file the reports. Martinez understood. He was giving Elena a chance to see her daughter tonight, to keep a promise that deserved to be kept. Yes, sir. 3 hours later, in a small room at the refugee center, a little girl with dark braids and enormous eyes looked up from her coloring book. The volunteer had told her to be patient, that her mother was coming. But Sophia had stopped believing in promises weeks ago.